Hello everybody, this is Richard from DraftaholicsAnonymous.com. What I have for you here is the sealed pool that we registered in our first How To Sealed video. What I'll be doing today is going through how I would go about building a sealed deck from it, focusing specifically on the ins and outs of competitive events. If you're new to sealed, there'll be plenty of general tips, and if you're looking at competing in your first competitive sealed event, then this video is for you. The first thing I like to do in competitive events is check that the pool has been registered correctly, that all the cards are there and they've all been marked down on the sheet correctly. Then what I do is take a quick look at the lands for any dual lands that may help make the mana more consistent, and particularly in this set I look at the artifacts because there are a lot of artifact creatures in this set that can help fill gaps that are in the colours in terms of the mana curve. The next thing I do is separate the pool into colours, and then arrange each colour into 3 piles, with the very powerful cards at the top, the decent cards in the middle, and then cards you'd rather not play at the bottom. You'll also notice that I'm placing the removal spells in the top pile, just at an angle to the rest. The reason I arrange them this way is because the power of your deck often comes down to how well your threats match up with your opponent's removal. So this is just getting a bit of a gauge in terms of the power level of each colour, and it'll also give you a sense of how each colour is positioned in terms of whether it has good aggressive creatures or is a more controlling sort of colour, and what gaps it has that you need to fill with things. Here I'm seeing that white has a poor early game, a couple of good removal spells, and Fumigate, which is a very powerful way to turn games around. Blue is light on removal, mostly has mediocre creatures, but has 2 very powerful creatures to finish the game off. Black is surprisingly low on removal, some good aggressive cards but not much else. Red has 3 quite good removal spells, lots of creatures in the 3 mana slot, which is an area that the other colours have been lacking in so far, so that could match up well, filling in that gap in the curve. And green, I can see, has got some good mana fixing, good ways to make your mana more consistent and even splash out into an additional colour, and a couple of good removal spells as well. So now we've got a bit of an idea of how each colour sits in terms of its power level. I've identified that blue has got a very powerful late game, and I've got to figure out what that colour is missing and what other colour I can pair it with to fill those gaps. So next I'll take those cards and lay them out in order of their mana cost, with creatures at the top and non-creatures at the bottom. Here I'm just seeing if I've got good plays on each turn. I also want to see if I have enough plays at 2 and 3 mana early in the game so that I don't get stuck with a bunch of cards that I can't cast while my opponent hits me with trains and things like that. So now I'll just go through the process of laying out other colours over the top of that and seeing which colour is going to fill those gaps the best, keeping an eye out for powerful synergies and keeping an eye on that mana curve, making sure that I've got good plays on each turn. This is the fun part of deck building. You can really sort of get engrossed in it, so you want to make sure that you keep an eye on the clock because you only have 30 minutes to get this done, and that includes registering all the cards on the sheet and collecting basic lands and sleeving as well. Some people like to come prepared with a bunch of basic lands already sleeved up. That saves a bit of time, and it means you can select the lands that you want in terms of aesthetics as well. You can make sure they all match. On the topic of being prepared, it's a good idea to bring a dedicated deck box that contains no other cards. Make sure you're careful not to mix any other cards in with the pool at all, because there are penalties for that sort of thing. So once you've arrived at the deck that you're wanting to play for the tournament, you'll need to register it. Before I start marking things down on the sheet, I just make sure that I have the right number of cards. In sealed, you have a minimum 40 card deck. The general consensus is that you should have roughly 23 spells and 17 land. This can vary from format to format and from deck to deck. If you're playing a very aggressive deck that has low mana requirements, you can cut back on a land or 2. And in formats where you've got lots of good ways to use mana late in the game, you can go a little bit more land heavy. Here I like to separate back into colours because I find it easier than jumping back and forth between columns while I'm marking things down. This time we'll mark them in the played column. The other thing I like to do is take a photograph of my registered deck sheet. Ask a judge before you do this, and only do that once you've already completed it and you're ready to hand the whole thing in. The reason I record the deck list is because you have to return the deck to its registered configuration for the first game of each round. You can swap any number of cards in and out between games, as long as you stick to that minimum 40, and return it back to its original configuration once you've completed the round. Remember to write in your basic lands as well, and to collect them from the land station if you didn't bring your own. And just make sure that you've got 40 cards marked down on the sheet, and that your name is written in the player using the deck section at the top of the sheet. So hopefully you've got a little bit of time left at the end of deck registration to look through your pool again and find cards that might be particularly good in different matchups. You can even look at entirely different deck options in case you come up against a particularly bad matchup for the deck that you've built. If you are considering sideboarding into an entirely different deck, it's definitely a good idea to sleeve all of that up as well, including the lands, because otherwise you'll waste too much time with sideboarding. So here we could consider building an aggressive black-red deck, for example, in case we come up against another deck that we just can't beat in the long game. So I think that was a pretty interesting pool that would support many different viable decks. Here you can see the aggressive black-red deck that we started building at the end of deck construction. It's got a really solid mana curve in the early game, and you could potentially get in for those last points of damage with the Hijack or the Marionette Master. And here we have the first colour combination that we considered, much more of a controlling deck with a powerful late game. And here we see another aggressive build, blue-red this time, with lots of energy synergies going on. Here we see the deck that I ended up registering for the video, which was a blue-green deck that was splashing red for the Welding Sparks and for the Harness Lightning. So that's it for deck construction. Please let me know in the comments below how you go about building this pool, and also if you've got any other tips for people who are just starting to get into Sealed. Remember to check out our other content and find competitive events in your local area at draftaholics.com, and follow us on Twitter at draftaholicsmtg. Thanks for watching.